You know why I love real estate? It's the people. I'm surrounded by people who do some incredible things, but I want to be clear about something. Cliche thing that's thrown around is that, oh, that guy's lucky, or, if I just had what he had, or, wow, yeah, I'll never get to that point, or they just, they're built different. None of that's true. The people that are around me have failed more than they've succeeded. They've just never given up. They're consistent. And more importantly, they're motivated to motivate those around them. Today, my guest is probably the perfect example of that. He's an incredible human being, and I think he's the first guest that's ever punched me directly in the face. My personal coach for the Real Estate Rumble, an incredible person, entrepreneur, and leader in the industry. This is Coffee is for Closers, and I would love to welcome Mo Dadkhah to the show.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Yeah, man.
Am I also the first guest you've punched in the face
before?
That is true.
You punched
me too.
I want to be clear. I will fight a big guy any day over somebody who's a little bit shorter, because me ducking down is you just beat my ass every time we got in the ring. It was bad.
You were so tough, though. I mean, I had boxed before, so that was unfair sparring for you. But I remember when we were training. That's how we met, I think.
Yeah.
When we were training for the Real Estate Rumble, you were so tough, and I could tell just from sparring with you, the level of grit you had. And sometimes, I've trained with people who've kicked my butt a lot, and, I've trained with people who, quit stuff. Combat sports and martial arts really do show you who has a lot of grit in them, and you had a lot of grit.
I think what I learned a lot during a very short period of time. It was like you're thrown right into the deep end. And you're being so nice about it. I think I pushed the envelope way too hard. I was hitting people way too hard for a sparring session, but, I kind of challenged some people.
Well, they threw you to the deep end. So you got thrown in with a guy who had a lot of experience, and that's just not fair. It's like anything in life. Experience helps.
Yeah.
And martial arts.
I was a redemption fight. Yeah, that was for sure. I remember the fight ended, and I was so embarrassed, right? I lose a fight because I don't know. I didn't have ring experience. His mom comes up to me and starts hitting me. She's like, "Thank you so much for not hurting my son." And I'm like, "What?" It's like you brought your mom here? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
He trained for 5 years, and then it was a good fight.
You did a great job, and it's a tough sport. And I'm surprised year after year people still jump in that ring.
Yeah.
Realtors and lenders and stuff who don't have a lot of experience actually get in front of a lot of people, because it is embarrassing. It's tough. I mean, I think the toughest thing to do in sports is to have physical combat in front of a group of people, because it's very demoralizing, and it's tough on an ego to get up there and get punched in front of people. And the Real Estate Rumble, to their credit, gets a lot of people out. Normally in a normal small boxing show, you might have 15 people, 20 people watching.
They
get 1,000. Yeah, they get 1,000
people. Yeah,
I remember when I boxed in the Real Estate Rumble, and it was Joe when they were at Joe's on Wheat Street. It was like 1,000 people. I was looking out as I was warming up, and I'm like, that's a lot of people out there. So kudos to you for doing it. A lot of bravery goes into that.
Well, I appreciate your help, man. And what I mean this, right? I don't think I've ever paid you this compliment. What I learned, the synergy between boxing and fighting and all of those things, and real estate and what we do for a living, the cliche thing is, oh, you're fighting. The regimen, the getting up at 4 a.m. because you have to get up and you don't have a choice, right? Has a crazy amount of respect. And once you do it, you learn there's some great synergy between the two. You've got people who, I know I have to get up at 4, otherwise I'm never going to train because I'm working the rest of the day.
Right.
And you'd be in the ring with us, and you weren't even fighting. You were training people. You were dedicated to it, and you could just see that the rules were coming out. It was like, no, man, this is what you got to do, right? Like, you got to ask more of yourself. You can get up. You'll be okay.
I think there's a real translation between a lot of sports and fitness and business, because there's no instant gratification.
Right.
All of it's very hard.
Yep.
I failed so much at the beginning of my career, and I struggled so much. I mean, I was trying to search for $50 wins when I first started as an attorney. And none of that was instantly gratifying. I didn't love being the guy who had no money. I didn't love being the guy struggling. It's the same with fitness. Your first couple days working out, it's hard. My wife's oldest, I call him my son now. He's my stepkid.
Yeah.
But he's 14 going on 15. He just started working out. And, we're working on bench press and squat and all these things. And he's sometimes down on himself about his numbers. And I'm like, I started there. You got to start somewhere. And every 5 pounds or 10 pounds you add on should be a really cool thing. Like if you go from benching 115 to 120, that's awesome. It might not feel to you right now like it's awesome because you're looking at maybe what I'm doing, or even one of your friends who's been working out a year longer than you, just a year longer, who's doing 135 or 155. You're going to get there. You just need to put in some consistent work.
The only thing you're allowed to get disappointed with yourself when it comes to probably business and exercise is when you give up.
Right.
Like that's where you should feel bad about yourself.
Yeah.
Because it's not allowed. You don't give up.
100%.
You have to stay in the ring. You have to stay in the fight. And surround yourself with the right type of people, right? I wouldn't have done the fight. I mean, I probably would have shown up, but it would have been even way worse without you in my corner, without Coach Quick in my corner, without Cotter pushing me, checking in, and like the community that's around that. You learn nobody cares whether you win or you lose. It's whether you show up.
Right.
Like that's where the respect comes. It doesn't come from the win because everybody has a bad day. Okay, you lost. So what? Now what are you gonna do? You gonna get back up? Right.
I've lost more times than I've wanted everything I've done.
For those that don't know who you are, I would love for you to introduce yourself. Because I know all your accolades, but for our audience, would love to hear it.
So my name is Mo Dadkhah. If you don't know me, I have a couple businesses, but outside of businesses, I have a lot of passions too, and I think we'll probably get into those. I'm an attorney here in the Chicagoland area, mostly do real estate law. I own a real estate brokerage, Main Street Real Estate Group. We got about 60-ish agents there, and it's been a passion piece of mine to coach and train realtors there and watch them grow. I don't think we have a top producer in our office that wasn't self-grown at Main Street. We didn't inherit any of them. They started as brand new agents, and now they're top producers. And I practice real estate myself. I'm an active realtor. I like to say I'm a part-time active realtor because I'm doing all the rest of this stuff. But for me, work weeks aren't 40 hours. So if a full-time work week, somebody says is 40 hours, then maybe I'm a full-time realtor, but I'm working way more than 40 hours on any given week.
Yeah.
But I'm the type of guy who, does a lot of things I do in my professional career so that I can do some of my passion pieces and do things. And now growing a family, that becomes a part of your passion. I want to be able to provide for them and do things for them that, I was a very lucky son. I had a dad that, immigrated here. He worked both my parents immigrated here, worked really hard, and I watched them struggle. And I'll never forget being 15 years old and my dad having a conversation with me that in that moment didn't really resonate with me, but today does. And he sat me down and he said, "You got to go get a job." And I was like 15, just in high school. I'm like, well, I kind of want to hang out. I don't really want to do work. And he said, "I've worked really hard, and have I ever said no to something you've needed?" And I thought about it. I was like, "No, not really. Like, he's always taken care of us, was a great example, gave us everything we needed." And he said, "Then I don't ever want you to have a family and then your family needs something and you can't provide it because you were lazy. So I want you to go and I want you to work." And
the hair in the back of my neck just
to me, that's been the single most resonating conversation I think I've ever had in my entire life. And I don't think I appreciated it when I was 15, but as I got older, I started to appreciate it. Now, when I got kids, I think to myself, I was very privileged and lucky. I had no choice but to be successful because I had opportunities. So if I wasted those opportunities and I don't work really hard in my professional career to be able to provide the things that I would like my family to have, then I'm pretty much a failure as a person. So I work really hard so I can provide for them and live out some of the crazy passions I do, like racing cars, which is a stupid expensive hobby.
Just so that if you don't know who Mo is, he's actually on TV. He's racing.
On TV.
Well, sure, but you race ridiculous cars on TV. I don't know many people who can say that they've ever even raced a car, let alone you've been filmed doing it with like Discovery Channel or something.
Motor Trend, yeah. Motor Trend is owned by Discovery Channel.
Okay.
I didn't know that until we got on the show, but we were on a show called The Drive Within, which if you watch Formula One, there's The Drive to Survive on Netflix.
Yeah.
And this was a kind of a grassroots version of that. Actually, it was sports car racing in the U.S. And it was super cool because when it got offered to our team, we didn't know what to expect. I thought I was going to show up and it was going to be like House Hunters, like one dude in a camera. We show up to the first race where they're there, and it's a full-on production crew. You know,
Wow.
they had shot ice road truckers and like big shows. So it was super cool to be on TV. I learned a lot about media. I learned a lot about, you know, presence, being yourself on television. But it was cool. And then, you know, raced professionally last year in IMSA. That was very cool. Was going to do it again this year. Some family health problems kept me out of it, but I'll go back to it, you know, next year or the year after. So racing's been a real hobby and a passion of mine. It's what I wanted to do as a profession when I was young, but you know, it's expensive.
To unpack it, you're an attorney, you're a race car driver, you're a boxer. I do mixed martial arts. You do a bunch of
jiu-jitsu.
You do real estate. That's a lot. How did you get? So let's scale it all back. How did you get into it? What's your story of getting into real estate?
So my real estate story is a little bit long and kind of happened by chance a bit. So when I got to back up. So when I was in college, my dad was a doctor. My grandpa was a doctor. Yeah. So the idea was their love was for me to be a doctor. And I wanted to be a doctor because I think I wanted to make my dad proud. And I realized about halfway through college, I just didn't have the passion he had for what he does. I mean, he is the craziest workaholic, loves what he does, and I didn't share the passion. And I knew that was a profession, being a doctor specifically, that if you just don't have the passion for it, you probably shouldn't do it.
Right.
Like my dad says, there's no oops in medicine. You know, you just can't say oops. You got to be on all the time, and you got to love what you do. And I didn't have that. But I didn't really want to disappoint Dad, so I thought of like, what should I do next? And race car driving, there was no money in it, and it was too expensive. So I said, I'll be an attorney. I said, I think he might go for that and not be too let down. So I went into law school in 2006, which is a great job market. I was looking at, I was money motivated. I was looking at stuff, and I was like, what does an attorney come out of law school making? And it was like $150,000. I was like, I could mesh with that. I could live on that.
I could live with that, yeah.
And fast forward to when I graduated was 2009, so the market had crashed. There was a hiring freeze. The big law firms had laid people off. They were taking entry-level jobs, and my job offers were $33,000 and $36,000. I'm like, wow, it sucked.
Yeah.
I'm like, I made that much money as a personal trainer in college. I can't live on that. So right out of law school, I opened my own law firm. And I was like, I'm just not going to make any money doing that.
Yeah.
There's no money in doing that. So I was like, I need a second job. What's my second job going to be? Am I going to be a bartender? Mom and Dad will probably be irritated that I'm an attorney. And then I, went to law school, and that's what I'm doing. I was like, should I go back to personal training? But the hours didn't mesh well with law. So I realized that I can get a real estate license as an attorney without taking the class and sell real estate. So I got a real estate license and was doing both. I was an attorney and trying to learn the art of being a realtor, the business of being a realtor. And I did both for a while, and one thing led to another, and now we have Main Street. Those early days were so hard. I made no money, and I coach and train a lot of new realtors right now, and I try not to give them any sort of false impressions of what they're going to do the first couple of years. Mm-hmm. I try to share my story and tell them I struggled for a very long time and worked really hard on both trades before I got to any reasonable number of success or any reasonable level of success. But it was tough at first. And that's how I got into real estate, was out of necessity, really. Because job offers sucked in 2009, and there's nothing I could do about it but open my own law firm or succumb to a salary I didn't want to take. And I needed a second job. So I was just hustled into real estate. But it wasn't a passion. It is now. I wasn't like that HGTV, like watch, that sort of thing type of guy. It was what made sense with my law license.
It's incredible. Talk about the struggle a little bit. I think a lot of people, this show's for agents, right? It's anybody can watch it, but this is really talking to the industry to say, hey, social media is great. It shows you all these things, but it doesn't ever talk about the struggles of the hard stuff. How did you get to where you are? Like, what was it like in the beginning where you struggled?
I think that's a great point. I think people look at social media and they might look at, successful realtors and not understand their struggles. And I love studying successful realtors. We were chatting off air about Matt Larissy, and I love his story of how he struggled when he first started, and he didn't have a $300 million a year business, and it's trended that way. He's the hardest working guy in the business. That's why he's gotten to where he's at. When I started as a brand new attorney in 2009, there's just no business. So, and also I didn't know how to litigate. as an attorney,
we were just coming off the crash. We're in the middle of the crash. Where we've got, it's all foreclosures. It's all. I remember it. Nobody wanted to be a part. Real estate was like toxic waste. You 100%. Told somebody you were a real estate attorney or a lender or a realtor, they go, oh. Yeah. Right. It was ugly, and here you are starting everything out. Yeah.
Well, I was backed into a corner. I didn't really have a choice at that point, and I think sometimes when you're backed in a corner, and to a certain extent, some realtors might feel that now as the market's kind of shifted a bit. But back then in 2009, I was backed into a corner, and I also didn't know how to litigate. As an attorney, normally you join as an associate attorney, some partner will teach you how to litigate, and then you learn the practice of law. Much like real estate, the classes don't teach you shit, and you have to learn on the job. But I didn't have that. So I literally would go to the Daily Center, where court cases are heard around here in Cook County, and I would sit there with a notepad, and I would watch other people litigate. I'd go in a suit and a tie, and I'd sit there like an attorney, and I would watch. I would take notes. You can't record anything. I didn't know how to write an order. So I would literally go look at orders that were written, I swear to God, and I would write what was written on them, like this case is, coming before this honorable judge, because I didn't know how to write an order. It was that embarrassing. So I started to see that people would show up for these status cases, which are just 2 minutes, like, hey, what's going on in the case? What's the next date? And it was 2 minutes up, 2 minutes out, the attorneys. So I was like, this happens all day long here at the Daily Center. So I went on Craigslist. It was Craigslist days. I said, I'm a licensed attorney. And I was very transparent. And I'm starting off my practice, and I'm at the Daily Center a lot. And I will cover your status cases for $50 at the Daily Center and $75 at Skokie because I have to drive and pay for gas.
Whoa!
I was living in the city. And people were reaching out like, is this fake? Are you real? And I'm like, no, here's my law license. Here's my ARDC number. Like, here's everything. I'm there all the time. And quite honestly, I just need the business. So I would pick up 6 or 7 $50 a day cases. And $300 there, starting to learn real estate, doing a little bit of real estate on the side, start to make some money. Some of those firms would then reach out to me and say, I don't want this case. It's not what we take. Will you take it? And I was a jack of all trades, a master of none. Some of my first time clients who are still my friends probably thinking like, you didn't know shit? And I was like, no, I really didn't. I didn't know anything, but I learned, but I worked my butt off on every file. And I litigated. I did some trials. And one thing led to another. And as I started to become a little bit more successful as a realtor, and especially when we opened Main Street in 2014, I transitioned to almost full-time real estate at our law firm. We do some estate planning now. It's just something we launched off because real estate's been slow. And again, we're backed in a corner a little bit. We have to make some changes as you get backed in a corner in business. And one thing led to another. But those early days, I tell people this, not to say I worked really hard or not to say, I struggled, but to lay out the framework that whether it's in law or lending or real estate, those first couple years are going to be hard. Now, if you were lucky and you came out in 2020, 2021, maybe you had that like golden couple years where things were really hot and you got comfortable, but that's not normal. That's not a normal market, nor is 09.
I would say that I feel bad for those people.
I do too.
I feel like I don't know a single successful person in real estate, and I'm talking successful, not you made some money. That's not successful. Consistency is success, right? You may have been on the top, you may have made a bunch of money, but then what happened the next year? True legends show their hand when the market's tough because they're still killing it, and here you are realizing that you may not have the skill sets. I'm not talking shit. I'm saying that that you need to be honest with yourself. If you listen to what he just said, I love how you put that together. You got to burn the boats. You were backed into a corner.
Love that saying.
Right?
Love it. Burn the boats.
You don't have an option because if you're still acting like you have an option, you're never going to get to where you want to be. You're going to lie to yourself until you finally fail and you're just going to give up. Right? You got to burn it and go, I got to figure this out. I love what you said too is that your clients today wouldn't know that you didn't know what you were doing because there's a difference there. Some realtors are phoning it in and it's obvious. You are learning behind the scenes going, I'm not going to embarrass myself. I'm going to go and do the right thing for this client. I'm not going to just take their money. I'm going to make sure that they have no idea that I don't know how to do this because I'm going to learn from somebody.
Right.
Even if that means sitting in a courthouse writing notes, that's amazing. I've never heard of anything like that.
Well, here's the thing. First of all, I love your burn the boats comment. And I use it sometimes. And I'm like, you have to burn the boats sometimes. Yeah. And for those of you listening who don't understand what that means, I forget who it was, which conqueror it was. And his army got to shore and he said, and his name will come to me in a second, he basically will burn the boats. He told one of his captains, burn all the boats. And the idea is,
you can't leave.
You can't leave. You either win or you die on that beach. And it's dramatic, obviously, but a lot of times when you go into business, especially sometimes when people walk away from full-time jobs and they're doing this, you are in a sense burning the boats, and you have to take your business that seriously. And you touched on something. It's that I may not have known what I was doing perfectly at the time, but I had the time and I wanted to learn everything as good as I could before I represented somebody. Because realtors forget that some forget that for every single one of their clients, that home purchase, whether it's $150,000 or $800,000, it's cliche in real estate where everybody says, it's the most important transaction in their lives, but it is. Mm-hmm. So you should learn as much about that client, their search as you can. I will sometimes go into a neighborhood, and I'll work anywhere in real estate. So I saw a Facebook post today. Somebody said, who works in Will County? It's like, I work in Will County. It's a long drive, but I go down there. I've learned it over the course of time. But the first time I went into Will County, or the first time I went into Joliet, or the first time I went to Aurora, I didn't know anything about it. But I did research a lot about it, the school districts, the areas. And I didn't just go out there like, a house is a house. I can sell a house. I can show somebody a house. I can walk them through a tour, whether the house is here or it's in, Indiana. I could walk them through a house and tell them about the house. I would learn as much as I could about, the person and about that area. And when it was with law, it was about the area of law. I'd sit there, read the statute, learn the trade, because if you're going to be successful, half-assing anything is just not going to get you there. You got to be consistent, and you got to gain knowledge. And knowledge, things evolve. Like how we generated leads in 2009, 10, 11, 12 is very different than how you generate leads in 2023, 2024. And sooner or later, the industry's shifting. So if you can't be on the forefront of education and learning, you're going to get left behind pretty fast.
I'd love to get into the shifting. First, I find that with this show, I really try and jump into value for the agents, right? I'd love to give, somebody watching this who would love to learn from you, who obviously you've done all the things. They're here and you go, okay, I got to burn the boats. But they don't have a leader around them. They don't have a mentor. They don't have a coach. They don't have anybody in their corner. They just have social media and a broker owner or a team captain or whatever it is, who's like, you got to go do the things, or, go talk to your sphere, and they're not really anything of value. What do you coach agents on, or what do you think that somebody listening to this could get from you that would change their business, or maybe could help them with it?
Absolutely. Before I get into it, you said something that was very impactful. I think one of the problems in the real estate industry, and I don't think it's a problem you can fix just because some people don't want to coach and some people are just not good coaches, is oftentimes, people get shuffled either onto a team or into a company where the person trying to teach either is like a managing broker that was a failed realtor and took a salary, and they're like, I just kind of failed at it, and the salary seems cool, and I can lead some people.
Paperwork.
Okay. I'm in.
Yeah.
And they're learning from that person, and that's tough. Or you have a super successful team lead who just is too busy and or cannot coach what got him successful to somebody else. And, you kind of fall into this, what do I do next syndrome, because you don't have a leader. And if you're in that position, and there's a handful of people in Chicagoland that are really good coaches. Seek those people out and get real coaching, even if you're relatively successful. Some of my most successful realtors, every week or other week, I have a coaching call with them. And I'm no longer able to teach them anything about real estate. Mm-hmm. I'm an accountability partner for them.
Yep.
And whether it's a brand new agent or one of our $40 million producers, what I always coach at the beginning of the year, and I think if I had to teach just one thing to a realtor and or any business owner, because you can do this in lending, you can do this in law, you can do this in real estate, but specifically to realtors, at the beginning of a year, or if you're starting right now, call today, January 1, set your long-term goal. And how I backed into doing what I'm about to tell you I coach is I read 10 times over, write down your goals and you're going to be successful.
Right.
And I think that's bullshit. I think maybe marginally you'll be a little bit more successful, but I would find that even in 2013, 14, 15, before I was breaking my goals down, I'd write down my goals and I would get to June or July. And I'd be behind on my goals, and I had this what do I do now syndrome. I was working in my business, not on it. What do I mean by that for realtors? And it's different in different business. But for realtors, spring and summer come around, you're going to showings, you're going to open houses, you're doing final walkthroughs, you're doing inspections, and you feel busy. But you're working on your current business. You're working in it, not on future business. Right. And then there's always that end of summer, fall lull and you're like, oh, what the hell do I do now? And then you start to prospect, and then, you get busy, and then you fall into that same kind of rhythm of working really hard, but not prospecting, then prospecting like a madman or woman because you have nothing going on, and then so on and so forth. And it's a vicious cycle for most realtors.
I think people go into a form of desperation because they're so worried about that next deal that they're hanging on to that deal with everything, and they think about it in the morning, they think about it at lunch, they're thinking about it when they're at dinner, they're thinking about that deal because they just need that deal to close.
Right.
And if that energy was channeled in a different direction, right? You have the deal, figure out a touch point to where you're safe.
Right.
You've done as much as you possibly can on that deal to get it to the next rung, figure out where that next rung needs to be. That's when you're going to touch it again. Forget about that deal. Move on to the next thing, right? Otherwise you're costing yourself money, right?
And I think the realtors, unfortunately, the cycle of real estate, especially in Chicagoland where we have winters that are slow, there's so many cycles throughout the year. And this is for the average realtor. I think if you take a very successful realtor, they do a better job of this. And the way they do a better job is I coach, take that long-term goal, and we're going to break it down into what you have to do every single week to win the week. And I break it down into how many warm leads you need. So it's something that you can measure, something you can document, something you can, a metric. And I call it winning the week in my office. And the easiest way to equate it to somebody who's never been in real estate is fitness. If I told you I had to lose 50 pounds this year, you'd say, Mo, that's a pretty big weight loss goal. If I told you I had to lose a pound this week, you'd say, okay, dummy, don't eat Chipotle like you do a couple times a week. Go for a run, you might lose a pound. Yep. Pound a week for 52 weeks is 52 pounds. Why does the 50-pound weight loss goal seem big and the 1 pound doesn't? Consistency. And I make this challenge and this bet with agents all the time. I say, if I make them 2 fake bets, because if I made them real bets, they would take my money. But I make them these fake bets. I'm like, if I asked you, and I would ask you, if you had to bet a considerable sum of money, like $20,000, on one of your friends to lose 50 pounds this year, you probably wouldn't make it. You'd be scared. Right. But if I asked you, hey, I want you to bet on any of your friends, 20 grand, but they got to lose 1 pound this week.
Yeah.
You'd be like, done, deal. You'd shake my hand, you'd take my 20 grand. Why is it that you'll bet on the 1 pound and not the 50? You won't bet that the person who needs to lose 50 is consistent enough to do that. And the average person just isn't. And it's the same in business. And with their lead goals, 2 warm leads a week for most people might make them 200 grand a year. And if I bet them, what's 200 grand a year divided into 52 weeks? That 4 grand, 5 grand, whatever it is a week. If I bet a realtor 5 grand, any realtor that's listening, that they can't get 2 warm leads this week, they're going to go get 2 warm leads. They're going to take my 5 grand from me. It's that same bet you got to make with yourself, because nobody's making that bet with you. But if you want a certain lifestyle, whether it's 200,000, 400,000, 6, 8, whatever the number might be, $1 million or $2 million, you got to make that weekly bet with yourself, and you got to keep yourself accountable for that weekly bet, because all you got to do is win weeks. And you can back that out then. Once you have your weekly goal, what do I got to do every day to get there? And I use Wednesday as a pivot day for realtors. My law firm is a little bit different. We do the same thing. We break our goals down. But Wednesday is a pivot day. So if 2 warm leads is your lead goal, and I use people's average sales prices, their average conversion rates. If they're brand new, we'll use city averages, NAR averages. But if you're a realtor that has a book of business, we can figure out your conversion rate. We can figure out your average sales price. And Wednesday is your pivot day. So if you need 2 warm leads and you got 0, well, boy, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you better be doing things. You better be calling sphere of influence. You better be doing open houses on the weekend. You need to get those 2 leads. It's like if I got to Friday and I didn't lose that 1 pound, I'm dialing up my cardio. I'm making my diet better. And that's what I coach at the beginning of every year. I coach a lot of things, but I think if you're a business owner, you cannot have just long-term goals that are not broken down. And if you can win as many weeks throughout a 52-week year as possible, you're likely going to win the end of the year. And the key to that too is, if you're on track with your goals, that should give you some comfort after a couple of years. If you want to go take a vacation, like Matt will watch this if he watches this and be like, there's no days off, what's a vacation?
What are you talking about?
I take some vacations, but if I'm on my lead, I'm also not number 1. He is. So kudos to him. Like, he's the hardest working guy. He doesn't take any days off, and he wins. But if you do want to take vacations and you're on top of your lead goals and you understand what you have to do when you get back, then you can have that relaxation and just say, hey, yeah, I'm on track. I'm good.
Yeah. Anybody listening, right? Here's what he just said. And this is extremely important. I do this for loan officers too. And again, that's where that idea is that there is no difference between a realtor and a lender with what he just said. I think a lot of people get goals wrong because, let me give you a dramatic example. We'd set goals regularly, with my coach, with the people I'm coaching. We're constantly going over, okay, where are we at? What are our goals? And in the beginning of the year, when you first start doing this, what I was able to identify was when you're setting goals, you have to make sure that you have a metric behind it. It has to be something that's trackable. Here's the dramatic side of this. If I asked you, what is your goal? And you said, I want to be rich. Well, I have no way to tell you whether you've achieved it or not. And again, your goal doesn't have to be that you're rich, but just use that as your instead, I want to make $1 million. Okay. Well, to make $1 million, let's figure out how to do that. And you can scale it back and figure. So like if your goal is to make 100 grand this year, you need to know what your activity is that's going to create the result, which is then going to hit, what it needs to be to get to your goal. So for example, if it takes a certain amount of phone calls to create a lead, if it takes a certain amount of leads to create an actual closing, if it takes a certain amount of closings on your average size to equal your goal, now you can go backwards and figure out how many calls you need to make, how many appointments you need to go on, and if you don't have somebody in your corner keeping you honest, the biggest thing that you just said was an accountability partner or accountability coach. If you don't have that in your life, that's what's wrong. It's 100%. Broken. I have one. Everybody I know has one that is on a level that is working towards their goals, because you don't have anybody to keep you honest. Because here's what happens. If you've got a goal of getting 2 warm leads, guess what? If you have 2 hours dedicated to a certain thing and the first 2 phone calls you get 2 warm leads, and then an email comes across, what do? I already checked the box. I don't have to work anymore. Oh. You don't know that there's 2 more warm leads if you would have just continued making your phone calls, right? So your coach would help you with that. It's something that is extremely important to track what you're doing, tracking your activities. I had a realtor reach out to me, and I won't share his name, but it was an awesome conversation. He wanted to start spending money on an activity. It was going to cost him money, and he wanted to partner up on it. I'm not opposed to doing those things, but I'm going to ask some questions before I agree to it, right? I said, okay, well, let's talk about it. Why do you want to do this? And he said, well, I don't have any leads, and I need to fill that gap, and I'm just worried about what's happening. My response was, well, respectfully for you, my answer is no, immediately. If that's the reason why you want to do it, motivator, I'm out, because that means that we're just going to go broke together, and you're going to spend a bunch of money, and we're going to get some leads, and you're going to be desperate, and that's not going to work. If you don't mind, can we just do an exercise real quick? Yeah, and we'll figure that out, right? No, on the phone with this realtor, and I go, I'm going to send you an Excel sheet. I want you to fill this thing out, and I want you to look. Let's look at your business. And what you just said was, figuring out where his business was coming from, we were able to figure out where the actual business was coming from, and then we focused on those activities, right? And I think that you and I off camera, we were talking about this. It's like a lot of people get this wrong. They're worried about the wrong stuff. Focus on where your business is coming from or the activities you need to do, not on this organized chaos of being all over the place.
100%. I mean, what you touched on works for all businesses. I'd imagine, and I don't know anything about sandwich shops, right? But I'd imagine where business comes from Jimmy John's, they have a real good idea of exactly where their marketing is grabbing business, because a smart business is going to know where their marketing efforts are working and where they don't work. Now, if you took a different restaurant or a different sandwich shop, they might have a totally different place where their leads come from. And as a realtor, as your career progresses, if you're not tracking where all your leads are coming from, whether it's from your Met database, your past clients, whether it's from referral partners, Zillow, if you're buying Zillow leads, whatever it might be, you're shooting in the dark here, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. So you have to track that. And where you touched on something else, when you're doing that activity of being consistent and tracking where things come from, it helps you get very directed when your motivation lapses, because then you know where you got to go. Because motivation's this kind of tricky thing. Nobody has a never-ending bit of motivation. I look at it like, I'm not a video gamer, but I look at it like when I was a kid and you would play a video game where somebody had a full power bar, and then as the power bar kind of went down, the character was slower, not as aggressive.
Right.
And when the power bar is high, you're motivated, you're excited, you're working real hard, your character's moving fast. People naturally will have these ebbs and flows in motivation, energy levels. I have them all the time. Nobody has never-ending energy or motivation. But when that bar of motivation or energy comes down, you have to fall back on, consistent methodologies and systems you've put forth for yourself to be able to generate leads. And a lot of times that's looking at, hey, I might not have 8 hours in me today because something happened. I was just dealing with family health stuff, and it was the first time in my life I felt like my energy was sapped to nothing. But what I was focusing on is, I know where the majority of my leads come from and my strongest pieces. I'm focusing on just that because I can't do, number 2 and number 3 today, but I'm focusing on that. But if you don't track that and you don't know, what your systems of lead generation look like, when motivation drops, you're useless. So you have to accept that there's going to come a time in the year where your motivation levels are going to drop, your energy levels are going to drop, something's going to happen, but business doesn't stop. Right. The world doesn't stop turning. You have to keep consistently producing and being there for people on your team if you're a team lead.
I also think there's a point here that you touched on this a little bit, is that, you have to recognize who you are. Right. And 100%. I think a lot of people are trying to emulate, which is great. You have to learn. You have to be in the courthouse taking notes to understand what the craft is. Right. But this agent, in this exercise, we were able to identify that he closed 27 deals.
Which is great.
Great.
Yeah,
but he's trying to figure out, and I go, did you know where your greatest lead source was? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, well, do you know you got 11 of those deals all from the same place? I'm sorry. I think it was 16. It was 16, and he had 11. Yeah, he had 16 coming from one lead source. He goes, what are you talking about? I go, dude, they all came from gyms. Do you not see this? And he starts screaming into the phone. He's like, how have I paid for coaching? How do I have had brokers? How have I had all these people around me? You figured this out in 30 seconds, what I couldn't even see. And I think a lot of agents, they don't understand that you have to know what was the real activity that got you the business. Where did this thing start? If it's a friend from childhood, that was the activity that had an end result. Right. So maybe if you're getting a bunch of business from friends or you're not, what is the activity that you're doing? Why is there a 0 there? Why are you not focusing on your friends? Like, whoever you are, let's fill those gaps and figure it out, or expand on it if that's where you're being the most successful.
You gave him so much value. I mean, you directed him to probably the most important piece of his business, which is having real metrics like we were talking about and understanding where your business comes from. And that's kind of the shame of the real estate world is I think a lot of realtors think of themselves as salespeople. And I think the last couple of years have been a little bit easy. I mean, 2020, 2021, and 2022 were easy. 23 was not the easiest, and 24 has been tough.
Yep.
But I think deals fell in people's laps. And they're like, oh, this is kind of simple. And I'm just going to just do what I've been doing, and real estate deals are going to fall in my laps. And they didn't think of it as business owners. Yeah. And I tell my agents, I'm like, what you are is you're a business owner. What your brokerage is, they're consultants to help you grow it. They're going to give you tools. They're going to give you coaching. They're going to train you how to grow your business. But you must think of yourself as a business owner. And if you take any business outside of real estate, outside of lending, outside of law, if they don't understand where their leads and their customer base are coming from, and they don't have metrics for things, that business is going to fail pretty fast. It's business planning 101. You got to learn that stuff. And I think realtors, the ones that are maybe not where they want to be, they're just not operating like a true business.
Yeah, I agree.
You're an independent contractor. You're a business owner.
So let's pivot a little bit. I mean, we talked on this just a little, and I'd love to. I've seen, your comments. I've seen you talk about this openly, right? Where we're in a different world. Look, as a lender, I feel terrible with how much drama there is and how much stress there is for what you all are going through.
You've been through it.
I've been through it. In 2008, the response to what had happened was Dodd-Frank, right? And it was the biggest, the most archaic, just slap a Band-Aid on a bullet hole legislation that went through without any rhyme or reason as to how we were going to put things together. And we as lenders were deemed the enemy. We're the ones that did all this. So we had to sift through this and figure out, okay, these new rules that are here, how do we survive? Now, I'll tell you this, it was fine. We figured it out. And to be honest with you, it ended up being better for the client. And I will be avid supporter of the fact that we do not make up closing costs or interest rates or any of those things right before closing. And that used to happen. Yeah. Now there's legislation against that. And that's not fair to the consumer. They don't know what they're walking in for a closing table. That's not fair. I would love to hear your opinion, because I'm not a realtor, on what's happening right now with the change in the industry on commission and all of the changes that are being proposed moving forward.
Yeah, the world got it wrong this time. I mean, really? This was the initial lawsuit that was filed by, I think, overly opportunistic attorneys that saw a small opportunity there, and then it was decided upon by a jury that I think didn't know what the hell they were doing.
Yeah.
Coming from a litigation background, when you look at a case of this magnitude that you're talking 9-10 figures, when a jury decides a 9-10 figure case in 45 or minutes or 60 or 90 minutes, that's insane.
Yep.
It means one of two things. Either they're trying to punish, or they didn't understand what was going on. I wasn't obviously there to listen and see if the attorneys did a good job or not. So when the class action lawsuit, the initial decision came out, and there was this big judgment looming, opportunistic attorneys in other areas start to file the same lawsuit. So it was a domino effect that, we couldn't have expected. But peeling that onion back a little bit, the lawsuit was basically saying that somehow there was some collusion between the National Association of Realtors, these big law firms, and sellers' attorneys, sellers' agents, to set a commission standard of 5 or 6%. And what was happening was, the sellers were getting screwed, and sellers were paying for the buyer's realtor, and didn't take into account at all that I think it's 93% of sellers sell to buy. Okay. There's some people who downsize, some people rent, some people sell investment properties, but 93%, I think it's NAR's numbers. 93% of people are selling to buy when they come to sell their home. Those people usually buy up. So, okay, you paid the buyer's commission in some, convoluted way on your sale, but then you bought something and you didn't pay commission, but you got a realtor to represent you. So you actually saved money, because the 2.5% or 2% or whatever the payment would have been that you would have paid on your buy, it would have been more than you paid on your sale, because you bought up. So no consumer was hurt. Also, they had the free ability to go to a flat service realtor. They could have listed for sale by owner. They contracted for that piece. So nobody was forced into it. It wasn't like, a energy company and comes and says, yeah, you got one energy choice here at your house, Tim, and if you don't take this one, that's it. You don't get electricity to your house. That's not how that worked. They had a lot of options. So I think the nature of how the lawsuit came about, I think they just got it wrong. But it is what it is. It's like we're backed in a corner and it happened, and now we just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
I think NAR sold us out. I'll say that. And I was a big NAR supporter. I went down to Springfield. I, did all that stuff with NAR.
You've been active over the years. You're an active defender of the industry. You've supported 100%. All of the work that they've done. It's crazy now. And now it's almost like there's a line in the sand.
They sold us out in the sense that they could have just filed bankruptcy, right? And they saved themselves. So it was a little bit self-serving there, because at the end of the day, I don't think it was right for NAR to get sued. Okay. I don't think that they were involved in collusion or any of that stuff. I don't believe that to be true, honestly. Okay. But they now have this settlement that went into play that has all, and I'll touch on part of the settlement in a second and what it means for us. But it was either settle or go bankrupt. Well, most of us don't like what's happening right now. We don't care to be under NAR's banner. The idea was that they were protecting our interest, protecting homeowners' interest. I don't think they're protecting homeowners' interests with this, because at the end of the day, if you're selling to buy, you're paying that buyer's fee no matter what. Who is really getting hurt by this entire decision is those first-time home buyers, the people who don't have means. And if your vested interest was to help those people out, you just screwed them.
Yep.
Because the person who's selling to buy has enough money either from their proceeds to pay their realtor or whatever, or they've gone through the transaction once or twice. If they're going to do it themselves again, they've gone through an inspection. They have an attorney. They've done this. They understand the process. They have their lender, that they trusted last time, whether they liked them or not. They closed the deal. They can go back to them. That first-time home buyer that might only have enough money for that 5% down, or even that, God forbid, the FHA buyer who's getting a credit back for part of their 3.5%, they don't have money to pay their realtor. So one of two things will happen to this person. They're either going to have to move forward without a realtor and get absolutely crushed by the listing agent. I brought him up a couple times. I listened to Matt's thing, like, you want to come negotiate against me? It was a very impactful, you buyer are going to come and negotiate against me, the best at this. You're at a diminished capacity. You're not going to be a better negotiator than he is. And
he even goes in to say that, I won't do dual agency. He's like, I'm not doing that. He's like, you need somebody because you're going to miss dates and all these other things. It's like,
it's hard to close the deals.
How do you protect both people, right?
I do them at the law firm sometimes where the people are unrepresented.
Yeah.
Those deals are very, very difficult to get to a closing. People don't understand the process.
Yep.
They goof up the dates. They ask for things that are unrealistic, and deals die. And here's the reality of it for those people who are first-time home buyers. They don't know anything.
Yeah.
They just don't understand the process, and they will be negotiating against somebody who is represented by somebody who does. Yeah. And even if that person's representing themselves, it's a seller representing themselves, first-time buyer representing themselves, that seller's been through the process at least once.
Yeah.
They got to step up on you. So you've hurt the industry now with this decision. So I don't think they were defending the industry at all. I think they were avoiding bankruptcy, which is fine. They're a business, whether they want to admit it or not. They protected their business, and they're going to be around for at least a little while. So what happens now? So starting, I guess it's August 17th is kind of Judgment Day for us. Yeah. The biggest thing is this co-op fee that's coming on. There's a lot of things that are happening, but the co-op fee is the big one. So on the MLS right now, through August 16th, the co-op fee for the buyer's agent is listed at the bottom of the MLS page. And it basically says, hey, out of my commission, I'm giving this much to you to bring your buyer. They're stripping that away in August. And I've already started to see some agents try to take advantage of this and offer 0 or 1% or 1.5% or whatever it might be, and try to keep more for themselves or try to facilitate getting more business by saying, I'll take your listing at less of a fee because I'm not giving that buyer's agent jack shit. And I'm going to get more business that way. And I've started to see it go that way.
But isn't that a disservice to the seller? Because doesn't that steer people away from that transaction? Because now, don't get me wrong, realtors, their job is to show real estate, right? But I don't work for free,
right?
Let's use common sense here. Right. I'm not gonna go take time, get in a car, bring you to a house to, we're not that close. Yeah. Right. It's just common sense. I don't think that rule helps the seller in any way because you're creating less competition. Less people want to be a part of the transaction.
It crushes sellers when they offer 0. And I wish we had more time to figure out the metrics of how badly listings do that don't offer them, because I've been watching them. They're not doing well. And here's the reality. If you're an arrogant listing agent, guess what? The buyer's agent is doing more to sell the house than you are. And I'll tell you why. I'll give you an example. I had a client reach out to me about this, and I was very vocal on social media, and they're connected with me on social media. So they called me and said, hey, I'm thinking of listing my home. They've bought and sold with me a couple times, and I know where you stand on this buyer agent fee because I've watched your social media. I know you're against it, but explain to me why I should pay this 2.5% or whatever fee you think I should pay.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to take your home specifically as an example, and I'm going to walk you through 2 scenarios. I said, all right, I'm going to go through some pros and cons of your listing. I said, all right, you just added some carpet, but it was pretty basic carpet, but the carpet's new. Whole home needs a paint job. Location is great, but you can kind of hear the train. I said, your rooftop deck is badass. You have no master bath. You have no primary bathroom. I said, those are some pros and some cons, all jumbled together. Mm-hmm. If I offer no commission to that buyer's agent, I'm going to show your home. I'm going to do my very best. And every listing brokerage now that has any sort of marketing capability is all doing the same stuff. They're listing your home on the same websites. They're syndicated the same way. They got brochures. They got virtual tours. They got Matterport. Yep. We all do the same stuff. So if you're pretending like you do something that the other brokerages don't, you're not, okay? Right. Maybe you get there and you put a little pizzazz into your whole spiel, and that's that.
Yeah.
That buyer comes through. That buyer's agent is then giving them all their feedback and is going on subsequent showings with them. You want them to come through and feel like they're getting nothing. You know what's going to happen? Maybe they shouldn't do this, but you know what's going to happen? They're going to leave your showing and they're going to say, yeah, you know what? That whole place needs to be painted and you can hear the train, and the lack of primary bath is going to make it really hard for you to sell. And I just don't think that's the best listing. We're going to do better. I said, or you're going to offer that 2.5% commission. Somebody's going to come in and they're going to say, hey, yeah, it doesn't have a primary bath, but in this price point, you still get a really big unit. The garage is large, the rooftop deck, the other units don't have. They're going to give you an honest shot at selling your listing. So you're going to end up on the market for longer. People are going to poo-poo your listing the whole time, and you're likely going to still get less than you would get if you had just included that 2.5%. So you tell me if you want me to list your home with a commission or not. And he goes, I'm sold. List it with a commission. Now, if you got a brand new construction home that's perfect and it's in Glenview and it's, the home that 40 people want, you might get away with it, but most homes are not that. And the buyer's agents are working their butts off. They're out doing, 10, 20, 30, 40. My record's 110 showings, so we don't have that many listings left anymore with one client. They're working their butts off. They're going and they're doing the market analysis. They're showing up at the inspection. And if you're a listing agent, you're also at some point a buyer's agent. Explain to your clients why it makes sense. They're about to sell and buy with you 9 out of 10 times. Explain the process to them. It was not a broken process. It was not hurting anybody. It was an opportunistic group of people, got a judgment. Now we got to deal with it. Here's the thing. The co-op fee going off the MLS, your clients didn't know there was a co-op fee at the bottom of the MLS unless you printed your sheet in agent view and they saw that.
Yeah.
So as realtors, we can work with one another on getting that message across to sellers and still offering a co-op. Now, we can't do it in the MLS. What I'm going to do...
Can I unpack that real quick for somebody who I know nothing, right? I look at MLS, but I am not a realtor. I don't pretend to be, right? Come August, some people are saying that you can still add it in agent remarks, or you can still, they've now removed that. That's entirely done.
They've gone so far. Actually, look last night because I wanted to get the most updated version of this I could. NAR has gone as far saying in their Q&A that if you syndicate the listing from the MLS to your company website and then you offer a commission on your company website, that they can stop the syndications to your site. So they're literally putting a dead stop to it.
What?
They've gone that far. So I was thinking of every workaround. I'm like, we'll do it on our company site. Showing time is a third-party source. So when your showing instructions are confirmed and it says your lockbox code is 123, then say co-op is 2.5%, but they won't let you put it on showing time either. So you are somehow, as the listing agent, going to have to confirm the showing and say, hey, your commission is this much. Otherwise, it's on the buyer's agent to ask, what's my co-op commission?
How is less transparency better for anyone?
Terrible.
Because they're not saying you can't pay, the seller can't pay the buyer's. They're not saying that. They're saying you can't advertise it. So all you're doing is putting this in the hands of salespeople. Right. It doesn't make any sense, especially with consumers who do have no idea that what's going, because they can't see anything.
Here's what the industry has to do, and it'll solve this problem. And it's what I've proposed to a couple people, and it's well received, but I actually don't know if anybody will actually do this. And I think it's got to be at the state board level. So IDFPR has to do this. When you sign a listing agreement with an agent, you're actually not signing it, me, home seller, with, Mo agent. You're signing it with brokerage. Mm-hmm. So it's Main Street Real Estate Group, like in our case, with the seller, and then you have a designated agent. That's a legally binding contract. And on it, it says, here's the full commission, here's how much is going to seller side, here's how much is going to the buyer side. Those things are legally binding contracts. Now, if a disclosure gets added to the back of that discloses that commission and gets sent out, it doesn't have to be on the MLS, but gets sent out that says, hey, this is the commission that was actually in the listing agreement, 2.5%, and it's going to stay fixed there, then we've solved the problem. Because the biggest issue I foresee happening is the race to the bottom in multiple offer situations. So
hold on, let me pause you, because I'm now understanding more than I even knew. Is the issue that started this, that you had a listing agreement and that actually wasn't being paid and there was an adjustment later, right? And so the seller thinks that you gave the 2.5. In reality, you gave 1.5, right? And they don't know. They
would see it on the commission statement and the master settlement statement at
right?
the end, right? So initially, it was like, hey, 5% is the total commission, and maybe the agent would tell their client they're giving 2.5 to the other side. Maybe they gave 2, maybe they kept 3, whatever it might be. Now, good brokerages are line iteming. Hey, if this is 5%, 2.5 is going here, 2.5 there. If it's 4%, 2.5 there, 1.5. When I would take 4% listings, my entire career, I would give 2.5 to the buyer side. I would take 1.5. I would take less because I thought it was a value to give a full commission to the buyer side, because I thought I was doing proper by my seller to make sure that the buyer's agent was motivated, was fighting for that listing. So even when I took a reduced commission, I always gave the 2.5. So when I'm saying this today, I've done this my whole career. I've always given that commission. Now, what I think, if regulation's not put into place to fix this, what I think is going to happen is there's going to be a race to the bottom here, because when there's a multiple offer situation and there's no co-op commission on the MLS, and we don't know that that's fixed in place, because when the co-op commission said 2.5% before, you had to pay that out. That was something that if you didn't pay that out, you could go to CAR if that's your board and fight to get that commission. Now, if it's not there and I'm offering on a place that's got 10 offers, what's the first thing the seller is going to cut? Like, who's willing to take no commission, or who's willing to take 500 on the buyer side, or which buyer's willing to just have their buyer pay the buyer's agent commission? It'll be a race to the bottom. But if up front that legally binding contract between seller and brokerage has a set fee in there, and there's a disclosure that fixes that fee and doesn't allow it to get negotiated down during multiple offer situations, well, great. Then somewhere through the process, we as realtors will figure out how to disclose what that listing agreement commission was. And if we do a good job of explaining, hey, some commission to the buyer's agent makes sense, and maybe it's going to go away from the 2.5 average to 2%, and you just got to work harder. And some agents are going to fall out of the business, and there's going to be more for those of us who work our butts off.
Amen.
If I do 50 million at 2%, it's better than 20 million at 2.5%. So that may happen.
The same thing happened in lending. The exact same thing happened in lending. Yeah, I mean, I remember when I entered the industry, I saw people that were taking 10 points, 8 points on a deal. And it's like, what?
Crazy.
You think about that now and you're like, that can't be real, right? And that was just on the front end. Who knows what was on the back end? Like, wild stuff. That is not appropriate. Now, I don't think that's the exact same thing here, but I think that, the transparency and working it out so that everybody wins is extremely important. Just shooting this rule out there where you're just making people, make phone calls to discuss commission and there's nothing written is nuts. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
And it's realtors right now being opportunistic. And I'm sorry, if you're a realtor out there right now offering 0% commission, you're part of the problem. Like, you're an absolute problem. And I've called a couple people out, and that's not my style. But I'm calling people out for this because I think it's hurting the industry. And this is an industry you've been making money in for a long time. Don't hurt your peers with this crap. Some of these agents are good enough to be able to explain the scenario I just gave you to their clients, and be able to explain that scenario appropriately. And I am of the type of mindset that I also don't have to take a listing that's overpriced. Somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to list 100,000 over, market value. I'm not going to take that listing. I'm past that. Right. It's going to be the same as somebody putting me in a position where I'm going to have a lot of difficulty selling that home. You're putting me in that same position. So if we can't meet eye to eye on what I'm trying to accomplish for your listing, I'm probably not going to take your listing. And I think there's a lot of agents right now that if they just, instead of trying to, pick up 2, 3, 4 extra listings for themselves, protected both the consumer, because this is hurting the consumer, and protected their industry. And somebody said on one of my posts, and if you're watching this, you're going to know who you are. And it pissed me off, but I didn't directly attack him for it, because I respect the fact that he's got a business and I didn't want to go after him. The person basically said, the only person we should look out for is the consumer. And yes, by rule standpoint, you look out for your clients. I look out for my clients' interests more than everybody. But there is an avenue of looking out for the consumer and the industry together. Mm-hmm. And by doing what you're doing, you're hurting the industry. We just explained a couple scenarios where those first-time home buyers are screwed. A lot of people who just don't have the down payment assistance are screwed. But you're also hurting your industry. And as you begin to hurt the industry, it eventually trickles down to the consumer. And I think if you're the type of person right now who's giving that 0% commission, especially if you're trying to keep more of it for yourself, cut it out. You're going to eventually, it's going to hurt everybody, and you got to stop.
I'll call it out right now. I'm willing to be bold enough to say that I have not heard a single justification for the not paying the buyer's agent fee. And I'm willing to have you on the show. If you're listening to this right now and you want to argue with me about it and tell me I'm wrong, I'm all for it. Come on.
I'll debate anybody on that.
But I just don't I've never heard a valid justification at skin deep. Sure. We've got, yes, less fees. Yes, it's, you got more control. Okay, cool. But what gives me pause is I would never say F the industry. I would never say I don't care about anybody else, because you people are the reason I am where I'm at. You, as an industry, are the reason I've become better. We get through this together. I can't do what I do without the people surrounding me. So to say screw all of you is nuts. And I don't get it.
Your peers on every deal. Listen, unless you're dual agenting the deal, everything you've sold, you're on one side, there's a buyer or a seller's agent on the other. You have to cooperate. It's called a cooperative broker commission.
Right.
You have to cooperate to get that deal to a finish line. Somebody wants to sell, somebody wants to buy. I say this in law all the time. When I come across an attorney who's like not really a real estate attorney, he's just being a jerk, I'll pick up the phone and be like, listen, it's not litigation. Somebody wants to sell, somebody wants to buy. We're going to protect our clients, but we have the same exact end goal. Yeah. As a realtor, you have that same exact end goal. So if you're just offering 0% commissions right now, because here's the thing, I've also read a couple of people that say, oh, like you can't offer a buyer's co-op commission. That's bullshit. You can't. You can still offer the same commission or a little bit less or offer something. You just August 17th can't put it in the MLS. So keep getting the story correct to your sellers that you're hurting yourself by doing that. Now, they're well within their rights to say, no, I'm not going to pay that. And then you're well within your rights to take the business or not. But if you are just grabbing listings and not giving commission to the other side, or you're trying to keep more for yourself, you're killing the industry and you're killing your client. And at the end of the day, a lot of those people are getting, the industry knows who you are. Yeah. I mean, and
I feel like people are taking notice. I mean, I hear about it more and more. It's like, when it's seen, everybody's vocal. They're like,
pisses me off.
Like, why is this on here? Now, look, again, I'm not knocking anybody's business. I mean, if you can run your ship however you would like, and maybe you have a seller that was just flat out like, you know what, I don't care. I'm not offering it. You either want my listing or not, and you made the decision. All right, I'll take the listing. I'll put it up. It is what it is. Okay, right? So maybe it isn't you. Maybe it isn't you being a jerk. But as long as, for me, like when I see a pattern, you go, okay, well that's interesting. I just want to protect those around me. Again, I'm not a realtor. I'm just an outsider looking in, trying to figure this out together, and I want to see people survive.
And there's some, and brokerages should be teaching this value. I had a couple broker owners that reached out to me and said, I shouldn't have said what I said. And I was like, well, I'll tell you something. You guys are not teaching the value of that co-op commission to your agents to teach to your clients. And you should learn the true value, then coach it. Because what I'm saying is not illegal. It's not wrong. It's a matter of positioning, what a co-op fee is the right way to the seller and showing them that by offering this, you're going to get your end goal at a better price point. You're going to net more dollars and you're going to do it quicker. And I think that, the trouble is, again, it goes back to the lawsuits scared the crap out of a lot of people. And I think people are just afraid of saying certain things and afraid of doing certain things. So a lot of brokers have gone like super, super conservative with this decision.
Yeah.
They should go read the Q&As. They should go read what it's actually saying. You can still offer these commissions. And if you as a real estate brokerage and you're a broker owner, you have a listing agreement, force your agents to live and die by that listing agreement. Because I let anybody out. Any of my agents who've ever come to me and said, hey, my client signed this 6-month ordeal, this listing agreement, but they want something else. I'm like, tear it up, let it go. Don't force somebody to work with you that doesn't, want to work with you.
That's your client.
Just take care of it. Business will come around, set them free. I don't hold listing agreements over anybody's head. But if they've signed a co-op commission, force your agents to pay that co-op commission out. Don't change it to your benefit to be, 3% to your benefit, 2 to the other if it was 2.5. Force that 2.5 paid out. And I think if IDFPR gets involved and they say, hey, what's in the listing agreement must be paid out, that'll go a long way. I heard a rumor that the 8.0 is in the works, the multi-board, and I also heard a rumor that there was a California MLS, and I didn't verify it, but it was clickbaity, and I saw the title, and I'm sometimes skeptical about that.
Yeah,
where they're allowing concessions, buyer concessions. It's not a commission, it's a concession to be listed in the MLS, which is like, it's the same damn thing. You just did a workaround. You didn't call it a co-op commission. You called it a concession.
You're making the lender and me twitch because
because now you're like, oh, well, there's a set fee of concession. Now I got to prove the concession. Now they're trying to make it a concession. Now you overcomplicate it.
It's also technically, if you're getting a financed mortgage, the word concession is not going to get us out of the fact of at the current stage, right?
Yeah.
It's in the current environment. There has been nothing allowing us to get past this of that's a seller credit. Right? Like it is. And so then you run into issues where if the seller's giving a credit towards the loan, where do we apply it? How do we, right? Because technically the buyer's commission, is that now a fee? Like we're in an uncharted area because it's never been designed this way. And Fannie and Freddie have not changed their ruling. They've not done anything to say, that this is now allowable or we're going to change this. They do allow, on VA specifically, they allowed the language to change so that we can proceed, right? But it's because technically on a VA loan, you're not allowed to have any compensation, right? Going from, the buyer side or whatnot to the seller. So the truth is that we need more. Now, I know Fannie and Freddie are paying attention, and there's no way to speak on it at this stage because there's no ruling. Obviously, we need to get to August and figure it out, but I would assume they're working this out, trying to figure out a way to do it. What happens when we get to a place, because what I love to see is agents who are like, well, we're just have to roll it into a loan, or we're gonna have to, the lender's gonna have to give a credit. Last time I checked, our rates are up in comparison to where we've been for a long time. And what a lot of people are not understanding is that if the stack on the rate sheet is this, it's not like a couple ticks to get up to the credit that you need for 2.5%.
Right.
These aren't subprime mortgages. These are prime. So there isn't enough revenue there. And so let me understand, you now want us to sell 11%, 12%? I mean, like, what are you saying? You want a 2.5% credit coming from the lender? That's a huge variance here because of where we are in the market. So education is key on this before you start advising people on, oh, this is how we're going to do it. We also can't roll it into a loan. That's never been a thing. We don't roll closing costs into a loan on a purchase. So what do we do there? Moving forward, though, I think that there's going to be some changes that we're going to see some adjustments. We're going to see, just like we saw with Dodd-Frank, the industry's going to have to change. Fannie's going to have to look at this. And obviously we have to see what the final ruling is. It's interesting, right? There's a lot of activity and a lot of conversations around listings, right? Most agents, understandably, are talking about the listing side. The buyer side has so much drama behind it because, as you talked about earlier, was, okay, if I'm a first-time home buyer, I can tell you as a lender, I run into people all the time that they're doing the best they can. They've saved for 10 years. They've done, a bunch of sacrifices, ramen noodle meals to get this house. And if you're coming to them saying they need 2.5% more on top of it, you're going to walk them to the door. They just don't have it, right? So it's very interesting, that how we're going to have to adapt as an industry to these new rules. But what are you coaching your agents, or how are you handling the buyer side, and what do you think those changes look like?
So the buyer side, the buyer broker agreement is going to become mandatory. My whole career, have never used one, ever.
Really?
Not a single time.
Okay.
I've always trusted that my buyers are going to stay with me because I've done a good job by them and they're not going to go behind my back. There's some agents that have been using them their whole careers. Mm-hmm. I've never used them. I've never really coached them to be used. They're mandatory now. So we must coach them. We must use them. What I am waiting for is to find out from IDFPR what some of the bounds are going to end up looking like. And I think everybody, like lenders and Fannie and Freddie and everybody, is trying to wait to see how cookies crumble a little bit before they make decisions. And I think that's smart. Nobody wants to make a knee-jerk decision. But are there going to be upper bounds on what a buyer's broker compensation can be? Is there going to be anything in there that says if the co-op agent, the listing agent, does give you 1.5%, can you then still ask for 2.5% from your clients? What are the maximums, minimums? So I'm waiting to see what those bounds look like before I create the internal buyer broker agreement that I think we're going to use. I am coaching that we're going to have to use it, and I think that it's going to be a rip of a Band-Aid for most people. whether it's you or another buyer's agent, whichever one of you they come to, they're going to have this agreement signed. And it's just going to be a common practice that we're going to have to, get used to doing. And I think as it becomes commonplace, then buyers will also understand that they're going to need it. Where it's difficult is if you had a buyer before and they didn't sign this document and now they have to work with you again, you're going to have to position it the right way. And I'm going to position it as the honest truth of what happened in the industry. Hey, here's the education on it. Here's what happened. I'm going to do everything I can to get the co-op fee from the seller side. But if the seller's unwilling to pay me, what we said, I don't work for free. So here's what I am going to be looking for. And I think there's going to be a little bit of a interesting piece that'll come out of this is what are buyers agents putting in there as that commission number? Is it 2.5? Is it going to be 1.5? Is it going to be 2? What's that number going to look like? Is it going to change as the value of the home goes up? I think that that's going to be interesting to see. And I'm very interested to see what, some of these larger brokerages are going to do with the minimums and maximums there. We've always operated under a mindset with our agents at Main Street that, you can offer what commissions you think is fair for your services. You are a business owner. We'll coach you on how to get the best commission you can. But we've never forced a commission structure.
I've seen Chicago's a little different, right? Like rural America. I've drove across the country recently, and there are billboards out there with agents standing up there, and all it says is 1%, nothing, and a phone number. And it's like, what? What does that even mean?
Sure.
Like, there's no value prop, there's no anything, and so I think that whole adjustment thing needs to happen, where the standard needs to be recreated, it sounds like, right? And then the industry will adapt and adjust. And I think that'll get itself worked out. I think there's going to be a gold mine era where some people are going to, take advantage of it. But I think the dust will settle and we'll get back to business, and it's going to be business as usual.
And I think that the odd thing is this is all happening during a very strange market, right? Rates are high, but we have no listings. So right now, listings are selling themselves quickly. Everything's got multiple offers because it's just supply demand. There's just not a lot of supply. And even though rates are high, rental rates have gone up. So the buyer demand still outweighs seller demand in a lot of areas. There's some areas of Chicago where that's not the case. But you go out to the suburbs, boy, something hits the market, it's gone in a couple hours and there's multiple offers.
Yeah.
What happens when we get to a more normal market, 2015, 16, 17, where I was going out and showing somebody 10 homes and they had 10 options to look at? Well, what are you going to do? Not offer a buyer's agent commission? That's not going to be the case when the market becomes normal. Right now, we're in a very funky market. This listing shortage is, you know this better than me. You've probably refinanced a lot of your clients down into, 2.5 to 3.5 or 4% rates. And the average person buys to improve upon their living situation. Maybe they have to move, and there's some people who downsize, but most people are selling a house to go, get a bigger house, family's grown, whatever it might be. And usually they do that when there's a measurable increase in their salary or ability to do that, because you approve them on a debt to income ratio, and they have to play within those bounds. Well, most people who are living in that house right now, or they refinance it down to a 3% rate, or they bought it at 3% rate, to be able to improve their living arrangement at any reasonable number, their mortgage payment's so much higher. A lot of people can't even buy the same house that they're in now with current interest rates, so they can't improve upon their living situation. So they're just sitting put. And that's why we just don't have a lot of listings. When the rates begin to come down a little bit, some of those people will say, okay, now the rates might not be 3%, might not be 3.5%, but they're into the 5s, and I can sell and go improve upon my living situation, get a bigger house, move my neighborhoods. Once those listings start to hit the market, yes, buyer demand's going to go up, but we'll start to feel a more normal market. Some of us that have lived through a normal market in the past are waiting for that. And when that happens, I would assume, unless something else drastic happens that could, the market will become a little bit normal, and sellers will have to offer that co-op commission, and we'll go back into a normal market. We're just in a weird time. Not a lot of listings, rates are high, and then all this BS happened with this lawsuit.
The timing is really interesting too, because if we look at what's happening right now, we have this about to happen for real estate specifically. We have this change about to take effect. We have an election that's about to go down.
Wild one.
And then next year we get a new Fed, probably, right? So all the people who I've listened to and form my opinion, all the smart people and watching interest rates and those things, all see that at some point rates are going to come down as inflation numbers come down. We've started to see that relax a little bit.
Right.
We have seen some of these people refinance or come to the conclusion, like you said, of, you know what, this house is too small. I got to go. And they're selling even though they're at a 3%, right? Or they get a new job. Or you can't avoid the statistics. People are not going to stay in a house forever. You have to remember that. Everybody thinks, oh, they're just never going to. Not everybody wants to be a landlord. Not everybody wants to do. Sometimes they need the equity. Sometimes somebody passes away. They need the equity to buy their own home. They're going to sell that one at 3% because they just don't want to hang on to it, right? That's going to happen. So we have to have confidence in that. Ebbs and flows. What's interesting, though, is that if interest rates come down and the cost of money comes down and the inventory levels don't solve themselves, right? Because that's not going to be enough. The math is not going to be enough.
Right.
If demand slows, is the only time that we'll see normalized inventory markets, right? Because if people stop buying, then we get, less people buy, then we have more inventory. The challenge is that as a lender, my phone is ringing off the hook. I got more pre-approved buyers I know what to do with. There's just no inventory. If rates come down, I don't know. I mean, are those people now finding some inventory and pulling the trigger? And now we've got the argument that we could have a COVID-like market where people are fighting very hard to get that place again. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going to happen next. You've got a bunch of different scenarios that could play out. It's going to be really interesting. At the same time, we're dealing with realtors who are trying to figure out new rules.
I keep telling my good realtors the cream's going to rise to the top.
Right.
And at the end of the day, whatever happens with this, like it happened to you guys in 08, 09, we're going to be fine. Good realtors are going to be fine. They're going to make money. Every year more homes are built. It's not like, homes are going away. We have more homes built. It's possible part of the industry falls off. Yeah, if you were struggling already in real estate and, the average commission goes down a little bit, which it may, you may struggle and might have to go get a job and you're out. But there's going to be more business at potentially a lower percentage for the good agents.
That's right.
But you better, and we've talked about it a couple times, both of us, the value proposition you were talking about, you better be able to get that in front of people and you better be able to prove your worth to people. Because if you are that, agent that for 1 or 2 years in the boom of 2020, 2021, 2022 maybe, crushed it, but you have no value proposition, boy, these next couple of years are going to be tough for you, no matter what happens with this ruling. And I am very optimistic that people in the market will understand, both the consumer and the realtor, that some co-op commission needs to be paid out. And we'll figure it out. So I'm optimistic about that. But if it goes to shit, which it might, then I'm optimistic that homes are still going to be sold, and
people figure it out.
And any good agent that's done a good job, like we've been saying all along for a long period of time, not 1 year, but you've lasted the test of time, or you're a new agent that is just going to become that person that's going to learn your craft and hit your weekly goals and work your butt off and be consistent, you're going to be fine too.
If the government tells you got to hop on one foot to sign the contract, there's going to be a bunch of people hopping. There's going to be some that
flipping, doing twirls and singing if I have to.
You have a social media saying that I absolutely love that I want to bring up because I see it all the time and I love it. You say, what is it? You woke up today to chew gum and to go fight, or close a deal or something, right? What is it that you always say?
So there's a movie where the guy walks into a bank and he goes, I'm here to chew bubble gum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubble gum, so he's just going to kick ass.
So it's funny because you always do this in the car. So
oh my God. You got me some bubble gum?
Here's the deal, man. Next time you're in the car, now you got.
Oh, dude, I love it.
So you got some gum to chew at the same time.
I'm gonna chew some gum and go sell some houses in a second here. No, but it's true. Like you only have when I say that, I'm like, I'm here to chew gum and dismiss a case, and I'm there to dismiss that case. And right now, you should be chewing bubble gum and.
But every single time you always do it. It's fantastic.
It's caught on.
Listen, man, what?
So that container is green.
Oh shit. It's okay. Oh well, whatever. Who cares? Oh shit. Oh damn. I didn't even think about that. That's funny. Mo, man, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
Appreciate
you. Poured out so much value so quickly. You spent a bunch of time and really, really appreciate what you do for the industry. Thank you for being my coach and helping me with my stuff. And man, I just really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. This was great. And all the value you're adding with this show is incredible. And I think, if you're a realtor and you're not consuming information from guys like Tim who are giving you access to realtors and business owners and people who can provide this value to you, especially right now when you have to stay on top of your craft. Like you're behind. So listen to guys like him, and I appreciate you having me on to share my couple cents on what's going on.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.